Welcome to this session.
This session explores domain modeling in software development, covering key concepts like CQRS, state management, and bounded contexts, while also addressing common anti-patterns and best practices for using domain and application services. Our speaker is the founder and chief scientist at O&B, a pioneer who first introduced agile and test-driven development methodologies in the Philippines. As a senior professional lecturer at De La Salle University, and a board member and capability director of the PSIA, he's shaping the future of software engineering in the country. Join me in welcoming Dr. Callan Legaspi.
Wait a minute. Who added the doctor to my? I'm not a doctor. So to the hosts. Maybe someday. Pero wala akong doctorate degree. I don't know how that ended up there. Okay. Sige. So I'm gonna cover basic uh domain mga. Let me share my screen na. Sige. So yeah, nagdagdag na ako ng basic para not to set too high expectation. So some of you baka alam niyo na to, not I'm not nothing groundbreaking naman. My references for um, this this talk are some classic tomes, right? Applying UML and Patterns by Craig Larman, Patterns of Enterprise Application Architecture, Martin Fowler, of course, the classic book on domain-driven design, Eric Evans, although sometimes it's quite hard to read this particular book kasi walang code examples. I also, but so I learned a lot. There was more clarity for me when I also read Learning Domain-Driven Design by Vlad Konov. Kononov. Anyway, I suggest highly to get a copy of this book. All right. So normally when I'm teaching things, I try out um, I try things out on this um, application, this toy application that I build um, that I've been building just to try just to be able to teach. I use it as a teaching tool to explain different concepts, right? So just to show you how the enlistment application works. Um, let's see. All right. So here, um, say the student logs in, and then the student wants to enlist. So yun, nadadagdagan. And then of course it validates na walang schedule conflict, or if the student had already taken prereqs. Yun. So ganun lang. Very simple um, application, right? So that's what I use tr- um, to try out the different concepts that I try to teach. Um, okay. So let's start with why do we need a domain model. So um, back back in the day, so of course Martin Fowler wrote about domain models before we even had tools like Hibernate and ORMs that made it easy. But the fact of the matter is, when when you don't have an object relational mapper, it's very hard to create rich domain models. Um, so because it was very hard for uh, say something you write in using object-oriented analysis and design, right? Very rich domain model. How to translate that to manually back in the day when we were using JDBC lang for Java, to manually translate that data, keep it in sync to the database and back was very hard, right? The object relational impedance, right? If you've heard of that term, right? Um, so we ended up doing what are called transaction scripts, right? So let me um, let me go back to the the let me go to a code example of uh, transaction script. So yeah, are there people old enough to remember the days when we didn't have object relational mappers? Uh, all the young people, they may ORMs na kaagad eh. Right? Sige. So back in the bad old days, teka, saan yung example ko ng transaction script? So here, I'm trying. So here is an example of a typical transaction script, right? So you're trying to enlist, takes in a student number, section ID. So we have some DAOs or data access objects, right? Wala pang I wouldn't call them repositories because they don't really map to objects. Uh, they just call SQL, and there's it not necessarily mapping them to objects. So here we're returning the data access objects would return um, a list of maps that would be uh, key value pairs of the column name and whatever was in the whatever was in that the the record, right? That column for the field of um, the field of each record, right? So so ito syempre bago maka-enlist, we have to check if the student took the prerequisites. We have to check if the student is not taking the same section or same subject, that's hindi pwedeng magdoble, no? Tapos um, here uh, here yung checking for schedule conflict because you can't enlist in a section kung syempre nagkaka-overlap, right? Um, so all this code, right? Um, it's it's hard to understand and it's hard to maintain, right? Something like this. So finally, magsa-save, and it's also hard to test, right? You can't do testing without mocks, right? Dati nga wala kaming mock objects, but ito you have to hindi mo mahiwalay you couldn't separate the the data access from the business logic. So those were the days of transaction scripts. Um, so um, as as opposed to say a domain model, right? You'd model it with a student class, right? A student class will call the enlist method, right? And then it's not showing everything. So a student class would call an enlist method. The validations, they're delegated to other objects, right? So ito, checking for prereqs, checking for conflict. Ito I added locking para kasi syempre um, it needs to check if hindi sumosobra sa number of um, hindi sumosobra sa capacity ng section, right? So may parang locking dito. So here naka-delegate yung checking for conflict sa section class, right? So here's checking for schedule conflict, checking if it's the same subject. Um, yung checking for schedule conflict, it's delegated to the schedule class for checking for overlap, right? The schedule class um, would check for uh, would would check if the periods may yung schedule class, may period class, so delegated yung checking for overlapping periods sa period class. So ayun, right. So instead of having uh, natat when I'm teaching students and fresh grads, no, natatawa sila. So instead of having their God methods or God functions, yung naiipon yung logic with in a few methods or functions, di ba? So na-realize nila with a rich domain model, um, your code becomes uh, one easy to understand. It becomes because it's short and cohesive, right? Yung code magkakasama yung mga things that are related to each other, right? So yun yung rich domain model, but it was hard without object relational mappers back then. So because mahirap yung translation between objects and RDBMS. Of course, that's not an issue these days. Diba? So balik ako sa slides. Yun. Si um Ngayon hindi naman it's always transaction scripts, right? Um you May advantage naman siya, right? So one with transaction scripts, kanya-kanya yung you can assign different devs to do different things and they don't really need to coordinate with each other. Oh, I need to get this logic to work, makasave lang yung enlistment process. I don't need to talk to someone else kasi unlike with a domain model, the domain classes that you need to implement enlistment, somebody else, the same classes will need to be implemented uh, say for cancellation of an enlistment or for doing an assessment of the tuition, right? So so with a domain model, yung mga devs, they you have kailangan talaga mag-usap yung mga devs. Otherwise, because they're modifying the same class to get the whatever stories they need implemented. But with a transaction script, um, each dev can work on its own without having to talk to other devs. But of course, that led to duplication and low reuse, right? Um, Transaction scripts, because they weren't loading objects, because the problem with objects, you fetch one object, it fetches other objects. And of course, objects take up more memory than, say, just a bunch of strings in a collection. Lower memory consumption, and it was easier to work with the DB back then without an ORM. And then the disadvantages, as we see, code duplication, low reuse, low readability, um, and it was difficult to test, right, because of the coupled data access layer, right? And then, back then, mocking frameworks weren't there either. Um, so, yun, we see the domain model, right? we we end up so these days we create classes that model the entities and values of the problem domain and the relationships between them. um, See, Eric Evans coined the term ubiquitous language, right? What we're trying to achieve, it's not just pagadahin yung code, right? What we're trying to achieve is the XP value of in extreme programming, we have the value of code as documentation, di ba? Yung yung problema natin, di tayo nagkakaintindihan with the business people, right? Right? So and then pag may umalis na matagal na sa project, yung dala-dala niya yung domain knowledge, right? So the team becomes ha- has a problem because the person with domain knowledge leave leaves. So um to get over this problem, we doc yung code natin is we're careful that our code is documentation of the business logic, right? Um, so simple things like I was once working with naming is maybe half of that, right? So I was once working with so I saw one of the devs in my company before. He was working on a document approval system, and then meron siyang method na meron siyang field sa class niya na constraint, right? Very computer science term, constraint, right? That was the name of his field. Sabi ko, no, para saan yung field na yan na constraint? That's the number of approvers. Kasi kung yung document na to, kunyari, isa-set nila yung constraint to 3, it means tatlo yung approvers. Eh di tawagin mo na lang number of approvers. So everybody needs to know. So all your names, whether it be your field names, parameters, method names, class names, they all map to terms in the actual business domain or problem domain. So you end up talking the same language with the business people. Pag may pumasok, kunyari, kahit ikaw yung pinakabago sa team, nagbakasyon yung buong team, wala kang vacation leave, so ikaw yung naiwan during Christmas, no? Tapos, pumasok yung isang business person, sabi, uy, mukhang may production bug sa invoicing. So, kung walang mapping of the business domain to the code, patay ka, di ba? You don't know where to start. But if there is strong mapping, edi find mo lang, ano dito yung mga class and mga methods na may word na invoicing, mga packages, right? So there's a very strong effort to model the business domain in the code as documentation, Same thing with tests and all that, right? So it's a very XP value code as documentation. Okay. Um, you have less duplication, more reuse, more readable, maintainable, and testable. Uh, no need, uh, uh, no need for. It's not closely tied to um, the the data access, so you don't need mocks to test it, right? Because you want to test enlistment, then you just pass values into a student class called the enlist object, pass in a parameter, and then you check if yung collection of that yung collection of sections ni student yun yung ini-expect mo. Um, may disadvantages, right? So objects again are a lot eat more memory than than just a bunch of say a say say you know a bunch of of rows from the database, right? Result set, right, from the database. And then objects will pull other objects, right? Sabihin natin gusto mo lang yung uh, you want to fetch an object na gusto mo lang yung um, section, right? You just want to get the section ID and the subject ID of a section. Syempre damay din yung buong subject object, damay din yung buong room object, right? Damay din yung buong schedule object. Every time you instantiate a section, you can't just you can't just take the fields, right? Because when you instantiate the object, you instantiate the whole object, and those objects will fetch other objects, right? You need more coordination, right? Um, because devs will work on the same files, right? And then, of course, the last bullet point was resolved with. technology. So, okay. So, finally, ang daming kwento, no? Let's talk about an anti-pattern, the anemic domain model. So, this is one of the most problematic things I see today. Okay, parang si domain model, tagahawak lang ng data, right? Let me know in the chat if there's anyone here that doesn't speak Tagalog. So I'll make an if there's anyone here that doesn't speak Tagalog, I'll make an effort to only speak English. But otherwise, I'll continue with Taglish. So so habit ng mga trainees ko usually in fresh grads, gawa ng class, gawa ng fields, um, tapos puro setters and getters, right? There's no business logic. That's not the very point of object-oriented programming from the very roots of it, right? Ano bang object-oriented programming? It is basically data structure and the behaviors that act on that data structure, right? So kung walang behaviors and getters and setters are not behaviors, that wouldn't really be an object in the object-oriented sense, no? Um, and then, but why is it important to have behaviors? I'll explain later, right? So our example here, si bank account, right? Ang bank account, hindi pwede, there are certain rules, right? With a bank account, that's the data there is very sensitive. One is the balance. Maybe there's a rule here that balance should not be negative, right? Uh, um, Balance should not be negative, right? And then maybe ATM withdrawal should not exceed 20,000 pesos, and all transactions must be logged with a transaction ID. Or and of course, something very basic: the account number should never change, right? you, Otherwise it get the it's a if it will get saved. If the account number is the primary key, then it gets saved in a different, you modify something, it gets saved in a different record, right? So but with bank account, and then usually it's always public, right? um so um here with this anemic domain model, there's nothing that prevents invalid uh, invalid states, right? Because all the fields are exposed with setters, right? Um, so since all, but you need those setters and getters because all the behavior is done outside, right? Um, so here account number and balance can be modified by any operation, right? Just by calling the setters, right? So what's the point of making the fields private if you're just going to expose them? That's not really encapsulation. So and then you another anti-pattern which would normally match an anemic domain model is the manager class, right? That's where all the business logic is, right? So all the actual business operations are in some other class, right? Um, so it could be called bank account manager, and some people would also mistakenly refer to this as a service, right? They call this the bank account service every time they'd have. So they'll have an order, they'll have order service, they'll have a customer, they'll have a customer service, right? So that those are basically separating the business logic from the actual entities, actual domain classes. Okay. So over and over again, software, the great thinkers um, of software development tell you if you keep passing around objects, that affects the maintain. If you keep passing around data, then that affects the maintainability of the system. It's prone to bugs, right? Um, so this is just one from James Gosling. The maintainability of a program is inversely proportional to the amount of data that flows between objects. So here, every time need to call, you need to make a any operation on the bank account, you have to fetch all the data from one object and do the operations in a separate object, right? So the opposite pattern, which we should be trying to achieve, is what I already demonstrated, the rich domain model. All right. So here, we have the 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 account number can only be set once in the constructor. No more setters for the account number. We made the account number final, and then we del- we deleted the manager class, right? And uh, all the operations are in the class itself. And the advantage here is there's no more risk of invalid states, right? Um, the we no longer need to um, we no longer need to expose a setter for the balance because the operations to modify the balance are in the object itself. So there's no need to expose the balance um, if you all the business rules, if you write your code carefully, all the business rules are always followed with every operation, right? So the balance cannot change unless it follows certain business rules. No? So yun yung rich domain model. We get rid of the manager class and then we move the operations to the actual domain classes, right? So the benefits is invalid states are avoided, business rules are always followed, and you have um, encapsulation, right? You can remove unneeded setters, and even if you want, even the getters can be removed. Um, okay, so another pattern that closely follows the rich domain model, if you're trying to build a rich domain model, is the pattern called the information expert pattern. Um, So what's information expert? This is from the grass patterns of no, I can't forget now. Anyway, of the ones in patterns of enterprise UML and applying UML and patterns. I forget the name of the author, tip of my tongue. Anyway, um, Craig Larman. Um, so Craig Larman's information expert simply says the class with the information should be the class that does the work, right? Um, So, a lot of times, kaya nagkakaroon ng God methods, God classes, is because, okay, here's my business logic, and then hugot ka ng hugot, right? And if you're familiar with the law of Demeter, it's similar to this, right? The law of Demeter says our code should be shy. It shouldn't be reaching out to um, the objects that aren't in its immediate neighborhood, right? So, information expert says we have to split up our routines and move whatever behavior we have to the classes that have the information. So, wag na nating let's avoid um, pulling information and moving it and having the information processed in some other place. If the information is somewhere, leave it there and then move the behavior there. So for example, this particular operation, this is checking for I always ask students and trainees, oh, what does this do, right? It takes them a while, and then finally they figure out, oh, okay, it's checking for overlapping schedules between two sections, right? So how do we resolve this? Okay, the first way to resolve this is to make it readable is to write a comment, right? Uh, um, and then okay, you wrote a comment already, so take the words of the comment instead of taking the so here instead of just creating a comment, why don't we figure out how to write a method in the class that has the information using the words of your comment, right? Because the comment is the behavior, that's already the name, and then create an appropriate method. So here, let's go to the section. Instead of simply calling get schedule, why don't we use this? use this name, right? Use this comment, the words in the comment, to create a method called check schedule overlap, right? Or check sched overlap or whatever, right? So yun, the name of the words in the comment, para hindi na tayo, so that we don't have a hard time thinking of method name. If you were able to think of the of words for your comment, then you can use those same words as your method name, right? And then so we move some of that behavior over to the class that has the information. Um, and then now, uh, here we can replace that long and difficult to understand uh, um, um, bit of code into just this, right? That call to that method. And now it's very obvious. Okay, check for, so here the comment says check for overlapping schedule between sections, and then it's and then the call is current section, check sched overlap, new section. So the comment is now redundant because we made our code itself readable. We don't even need the comment. So sometimes I'm teaching fresh grads. They said, "Oh, the only they were taught by their teachers. The only way to make code readable is comments." No, make your code. I tell them code should be like a joke. If you have to explain the code, then it's not a very good. If you have to explain the joke, it's not a very good joke. And same for code, right? If you have to explain the code with comments, you it's not very good code, right? Um, so I tell people, if you're gonna write a comment, you write why, not how, right? Uh, you explain, oh, I'm using this particular library because this conforms to the export regulations, or this particular constructor, don't, even if it seems unused, don't delete it because it's used by Hibernate, right? Um, So uh, comments are for explaining why, and not how. Um, so here we can still apply information expert here, because notice, um, a lot of the information used for check sched overlap is in the schedule class. So why don't we move some of that behavior again to the class that has the information, right? So let's look at schedule class. We can actually remove, instead of fetching the information from schedule, let's just have another method called check for overlap between two schedules, not no longer between two sections, right? The section overlap checking will delegate to the schedule overlap checking. And then here, um, we add a check overlap method that uses those fields. And now in section, it also becomes very simple and immediately easy to read, right? Um, that's information expert. Uh, that's information expert. It leads to smaller, simpler code, helps you conform to the law of Demeter, right? Um, uh, that law of the meter, I would have loved to throw that in, but of course there's limited time, right? um, and code is more encapsulated, right? You don't need you have fewer need for getters and setters, right? So if you're having trouble remembering what information expert means, you just remember the shortcut, ask for help, not information. Okay. Okay. um, so um, command query, so CQRS, all right? So what does that mean? So there's a lot of complicated examples on the internet, but CQRS just means uh, um, you don't need to use the same data models uh, uh, for everything, right? So commands or data coming in that needs to be validated and and processed would have different needs from data going out, that needs to just show views, etc. Right? Um, so domain models are, again, they have their disadvantages. They eat up a lot of memory. That's really their main disadvantage, right? So there's people who use, so the very common beginners of using ORMs, right? They use it for everything. So they use it to generate a report, and there's 10,000 lines of in the report. Each line they instantiate an object which fetches other objects, which fetches other objects. So they fetch 10,000 times whatever number of other objects, right? And then they set eager loading to they set turned it on pa because they were having these errors. So all of a sudden, that one report loads half the database into memory, right? Um, so you don't need you don't need um, you don't need a domain model for a report, right? You It's tabular data, right? Um, so um, or maybe they're doing aggregation, right? They just want to get the average, so they load all the records in of an entire table in memory. They instantiate the objects, and then they just to compute the average or maybe age of students, right? When you could do that using a very simple aggregation function in SQL, right? Um, so CQRS simply means you don't have to use the same data model for everything. So normally commands, data coming in, right? You need to do some complex business logic, at the very least some validation, right? And it's very hard to do that uh, without using a domain model, right? A domain model will simplify your business logic, um, and normally it's one at a time. It doesn't You maybe load a few objects, and then after that operation is done, it's yeah you can the objects get garbage collected, right? So it's fine that you're using domain models for it, and it's very important because some of that business logic can be quite sensitive, right? You can't make a mistake, right? But data coming out, you don't need. So you have the data in your database is should already be validated, right? So you just, if you need tabular data, then fetch your data as a query, and then return tabular data in the form that you want for the report, right? And then for the report, just just display that text that you retrieved from the database, right? Same if you're going to, you need some JSON for charts, or maybe some XML or something. Right now, pretty much all major databases, if you want the queries can be returned as XML or JSON, right? So, um, of course, there's these very seductive libraries that allow you to, of course, use um, your your objects, your domain model. You just annotate them, it will generate the JSON, right? um, it's uh, it's very but of course that's more expensive in memory. So if it's a lot of data you're loading, you're going to eat up a lot of memory, right? So right now, if you need JSON straight from the database, you can retrieve the data, your result set as JSON, and then directly return that to um, whoever's calling your system, right? So um, so CQRS applies on the application level. CQRS applies also on the schema level, right? Uh, Normalize tables for writes, right? For data coming in, use normalized tables. And then if you need performance your um, for the reads, for your reports, or your views, then you could create denormalized tables and then just figure out a way to keep the transactional tables, your normalized tables for the writing, to be consistent with the denormalized tables. Like you can use database triggers, or you could do that in the application side, right? Or maybe schedule jobs, batch. There's some batch jobs that will, when when the transactions aren't very busy, it would read from the transactional tables and update the analytical tables, right? So so that way the analytical tables, they have they're written in such a way that they're denormalized so that there's reduced joins. When you need to generate a report, you don't need to lock all these other you don't need to lock the transactional tables, preventing transactions from happening, right? It reads from a separate the reports will be reading from a separate table that are denormalized, and they don't have to do a lot of joins, right? And of course, these in now in the days of microservices, you can also have CQRS as separate services, right? So um, sometimes, right, uh, like when I'm administering the Google Workspace for my office, for my company, I I need to update the users of a certain group, and it takes a while before I can see what I've updated. So the updating is probably done by a different service than from the reading, right? So it takes a while. There's eventual consistency, right? But I won't go into that. That's a long story. I'm just saying CQRS. It's it's on many levels. It could be on the code level, on the application level, or it could be all the way to on the schema, or in the or at the service level. So if I may share an example of CQRS in my enlistment, again, my little enlistment application, right? Uh, right. So let me go. So here, if in um, for the post where I'm receiving form information, right? Delegate. I'm using an ORM, and I delegate the operation to um, domain model, right? So the domain model we saw a while ago, the enlistment, right? It goes to here's the student, right? And it does all that enlistment logic that we saw before, right? So here in the for post for because before a student gets to enlist in a section, again, we have to check if he took the prerequisites. We have to check if there's no schedule conflict. So I'm using a domain model. But for the part where it's just showing the sections, right? The part where it's just viewing, notice for the get, where it's just showing a view, I am retrieving the data not from objects, not from a JPA repository, but from an ordinary data access object, right? So I would, um, so it would just be, if you look at the method is called find sections not enlisted by student. Uh, it's just SQL, and then the SQL will return um, I use the SQL will just return tabular data because that's what I need, right? So it's very light. I'm not instantiating a bunch of objects. Maybe I'm using a fraction of the memory of what I would have used if I was using the domain model, right? And then a lot of us application developers are scared to do SQL because I have to remember set theory. What's a left outer join again, right? I just fed the schema to Copilot, right? And I asked Copilot, I want this is what I need, right? And then I want the sections information for the that is not found in this table, and then it generated the SQL for me, right? So there shouldn't be a fear of us application, there shouldn't be a fear of doing SQL. That shouldn't that's no longer there, right? Because we have all these tools that will generate the SQL for us. So we can um, we shouldn't have that fear of SQL hinder us from writing more efficient code, right? Um, then the next one, you can't really talk about domain modeling without talking about bounded context, right? Uh, it helps us decouple teams. And for example, we have a domain model. When we're enlisting, a student has a section, right? So this is that's the UML. This is the code. So one to many relationship. It's one way. I always tell my trainees, if you can have a one-way relationship, that's better than the complexity of a two-way relationship, right? But then we decide to use the same domain model for classroom management, right? So now a teacher needs to get his or her list of students, right? So now it has to be a two-way relationship. The section now has a collection of students, right? And it's many to many, right? Um, and then in on the same domain model, we also put in the tuition fee assessment, right? So now, subjects, the section, it has a subject, of course, and the subject has to know its fee, right? And then so pretty much soon, if we are using the same domain model uh, for for everything in the business, for everything that the application does, the system does, we end up with a very complex model. Everything is refers to everything else, right? The main problem is people will end up we will have complex entities, because each entity will try to accommodate multiple different subdomains, the logic for different subdomains. And then the worst thing is people will there's going to be a drop in productivity, because by this time you might have multiple teams, and these multiple teams will be clobbering each other's work because they all have to maintain the same very large domain model, right? All right. So a bounded context simply means we're going to end up with a lot of multiple smaller domain models, right? We're not saying that for every subdomain there should be a separate bounded context, but normally it you start with, okay, if you start to have multiple teams working on different things, at the very least they don't share the same bounded context. That way they don't have to clobber each other. There's going to be some duplication, like for example, enlistment has a section, and then class management also has a section, right? But they won't. But even if they have the same, they both have the same. Both have classes called sections. Each bounded context will define section a bit differently, right? Different fields, different relationships, right? Okay. So we try to avoid sharing bounded context between teams because that would require more coordination. And we also don't want to have too many bounded contexts per team, because again, that increases the maintenance cost, because they'll be maintaining more classes, right? um, so uh, so nor so so we avoid sharing bounded context across bounded context across teams, but we also don't want to have too many bounded contexts being managed by a single team. Okay. uh, some related approaches today are modulates. Um, there are certain frameworks today that allow you to set certain architectural rules, like um, say you can't make a direct call from one bounded context to another, right? Some tests will flag those things, right? So like um, Spring Modulith is one of these frameworks. Um, and then when you start making microservices, make sure that the microservices are carved along bounded context. You shouldn't have uh, microservices splitting up a bounded context, right? And then, so let's see the effect of bounded context. So now, when we have for enlisting, right, it's still student only has one-way relationship with sections, right? It's not two-way. It's more simple. Um, and then for class management, it's still a one-way relationship. Section has a one-to-many relationship with students. Students don't have a relationship back to section. Um, and then for tuition fee assessment, we can actually get rid of the section class because the in the assessment to um, we just need to get a value of what subject did the student take and how much he has to pay. And for tuition fee assessment, as I said, you might have similar classes that have the same name in different bounded contexts, but they'll mean different things. In in uh, in enlistment, perhaps subject is an entity, but in tuition fee assessment, subject is just a value object, right? All right. And then another concept that uh, Eric Evans was talking about in his book is the concept of aggregates. So an aggregate, it's so a lot of times we see domain classes are often used together as a single unit, right? And then we would have often there would be one domain class that would be some sort of manager for everything else, right? To make a modification. For example, for an order, the typical example, you cannot directly modify the order items in an or you always go through an order in order to create new order items or modify order items, right? So that class that controls that where the instantiation or the modification of the other classes needs to go through that class. That's called the aggregate root. Okay. Um, so so for example, we might have so we have these two classes. We have customer, which has orders, right? And then we have orders that has customer, right? Um, so it's a two-way relationship, right? So, um, so the challenge here, right? It it might be okay. We don't know. Maybe we don't need to optimize this, right? I'm not saying we do premature optimization, right? That's not good. But uh, we when you fetch one object, you have to fetch a lot of objects, right? And that might if and it may or may not uh, load too much memory into the in the application, and we might need to optimize, right? So what we can do is we figure out what our aggregates are, right? And then we avoid one aggregate calling the other. Again, maybe this is premature optimization, maybe you don't need it, but if that's the problem that's happening, Eric Evans and again the succeeding books that expound on domain-driven design would recommend, okay, let's split up these aggregates, right? Um, so here, instead of the customer and the order having references to each other, they will just have references to the IDs, right? Uh, and then, of course, the disadvantage is we might end up with data inconsistency, right? So we just have to be careful that we're when we get these IDs, where we know we're referencing the right value, right? And there are frameworks that will help you avoid data inconsistency. I just recently watched a video on J molecules, using J molecules with Spring Modulith, right? So J molecules is the Java version of X molecules. So you can enforce certain DDD rules, like it makes it easier for you uh, to create an entity, to create an aggregate root that only has a reference to the IDs, but when you do need the actual entity that the ID is referencing, it also makes it easy to fetch when you did, right? Um, so with aggregates, small it's normally preferred that we have smaller aggregates, right? Because it consumes less memory, you end up with less contention. Aggregates, by the way, uh, are also your boundaries for your transactions, right? So if you have smaller aggregates, then you have shorter transactions, you're locking fewer records, then you have less contention, less chance for deadlocks. With larger aggregates, if they reference more objects, then you have more consistency, but of course, the more chance for deadlocks. Um, uh, and of course, it consumes more memory. And then, okay, services. Let me wind down the talk. So Eric Evans talks about three types of services. So there's the technical service. So services are stateless operations, right? You have the technical services, the ones that work with your infra, your repositories, the ones that send email, SMS senders, payments. There's the domain service, which is domain logic that doesn't really fit any domain class. Um, Eric Evans didn't really give any code examples. So I did imagine these would be helper classes or utility classes for your domain classes, right? But Martin, I think it was Martin Fowler, or was it Eric Evans, who also said, oftentimes you end up being able to find the right domain class for that logic eventually, right? So maybe you just create a domain service temporarily while you can't figure out where this logic belongs, and eventually you'll figure out, oh, it belongs to this domain class, right? And then there's the application service, which is sort of a facade to the app presentation layer, right? So, and to avoid it becoming a manager class, application services should be designed around use cases, right? Not around entities, right? Um, and then these are points where you can apply transactions and security, right? Okay, one anti-pattern that I'd like to well, discourage people from doing is the single implementation interface. So it's very annoying when I see I INPL in code bases for me, because um, polymorphism is supposed to use interfaces for polymorphism when you have multiple implementations, like in the collection frameworks you have the set interface, and they would have multiple implementations for set, right? So so why are people doing this? One is people are trying to follow the advice in the Gang of Four book: program to an interface and not an implementation. And uh, what's Robert Martin also said, in his solid interface segregation principle. Now, these people were referring to their concerns in C and C++, right? So, for example, Robert Martin's interface segregation principle, the reason why he came up with that, because he was asked to consult for Xerox. They had this printer driver that was taking so long, it would take them an hour to compile the printer driver, right? So what his recommendation was to use header files, because the problem um, with in that particular case, right? If they modify something, um, the linking with all the other objects, it would relink with all the have to do a relinking with all the other objects. So what Robert Martin said was, okay, let's use some header files, um, and then let's the let's make sure that way, and then when your uh, each header file will only be the will only expose the functions that the object that would need it would need, right? That way, if we need to make a change, um, we don't need to change the header file, right? Or if we it's only the header file that needs to be updated will need changing, right? So that way, when we need a modification, since the other objects are only linking to a header file, right? If the function signatures haven't changed, then there's no need to relink, right? And it won't take an entire hour for that printer driver to recompile. All right. Um, so the program interface and not an implementation, and interface segregation principle, they again that's linking, and the length of time it takes for linking is not a problem that we have in Java, right? So we don't it's not a principle that we need to follow, right? And then it's also a belief that it's required in the framework, um, like uh, like Spring, but we you can use concrete classes for to create Spring Beans. No, you don't really need an implementation. It works fine. Um, so if I may show another, um, uh, so if I let me show some code again in in right. So for um, so here, so this DAO of mine, right? It's I just annotated it as a component. It because it's just one class, so find the figure I didn't figure the need for to create an interface for it, but I'm able to use it in Spring, um, as um, I'm able to auto wire it in Spring, right? So it was registered as a Spring Bean. Um, it's not required by Spring to be an interface. Um, and I'm running out of time. Okay, and then the last thing is, okay, the service layer. Uh, that's a facade. As it's like a group of facades, right? The application services um, that separate the rest of the application from the controllers, right? Now, I used to think the service layer is required, but now um, what I realize is it's optional. So look at what Martin Fowler wrote. What is it? 25 years ago in his own book, Enterprise Application Architecture. He said, my preference is to have the thinnest service layer if you can, if you even need one. My usual approach is to assume I don't need one and only add it if it seems that the application needs it. So again, this was written 25, 30 years ago, right? When ORMs weren't even, or the Spring framework wasn't even mature, or I don't know if it was around that when he wrote it. However, I know many good designers who always use a service layer with a bit of logic. So feel free to ignore me on this one. So he ended up having someone else write his chapter on the service layer. He almost didn't write a chapter he almost didn't write a chapter on the service layer. There, it almost didn't make it to patterns of enterprise application architecture, because he didn't really believe it was necessary. And then um, he had somebody else write it because he wasn't really into service layers, right? So why did we used to have service layers when I was, when we had to write servlets, right? As our controllers, before we could test a servlet, we had to deploy it into um, our our container, right? So it was difficult to test if we always had to deploy. So it always made sense to separate as much logic as we can into plain old Java objects, things that you don't need to deploy, so that we could just test it using JUnit, and then we use our mocks, or we could do integration tests or whatever. Um, but now controllers are also plain old Java objects, and we don't need to deploy them in order to test them, right? Um, and then mistaken belief that transactions, if you create a controller, you can't have transactions there. But no, you can also make those transactional, right? So, so again, if I go back to my code, um, is this heresy? I don't know. Um, right. So so here my controller, it's transactional, right? Because here what you have is traditionally you have, if you do your if you write a rich domain model, what's going to be left with your in your service, right? Your service, this is all that's going to be left if you have a rich domain model, right? So this seems like a lazy class, Martin Fowler's lazy class, right? His definition of lazy class is, you know, a class that doesn't really, it's just passing to other objects. So you might as well uh, get rid of that class and have the classes that have the classes talk to each other directly, right? So since instead of this type of service, this application, this very thin service, which again seems like Martin Fowler's lazy class definition, my controller, um, right? Again, it's not a lot of code, right? I call the I call the I call the domain model method once, right? I fetch it from the repo, and then I call the repositories, right? When I moved the code here, it didn't really make my controller very fat, right? So up to you. Again, it's optional, right? Um, it's uh, if I may summarize, sorry to softcon, to my to the MC. I'm here. Let me summarize. Here's the anti-patterns. Service layer is optional, right? If you see the benefits, continue to use it. If it's just giving you more classes to maintain without all classes are all code has maintenance cost, right? So if the cost of maintaining code doesn't justify that isn't justified by its value, then you should probably figure out a way to reduce the amount of code, right? Okay, so sorry to the softcon organizers. I talked for too long. Uh, that's the end of my presentation. I hope there's still time for Q&A. Are you, is
Question.
are
So
there,
for now, we have some questions starting from someone anonymous from our attendees. So what are some common pitfalls you've seen when teams implement domain-driven
Yeah.
design, and how can this be avoided?
Yeah. So I think it's really the very first one is anemic domain classes, and then not understanding information expert, right? So if that's all people take away from my talk, information expert, enriched domain models, and avoiding the date um, anemic domain classes, I think I feel like time well spent na, right? Yeah, that's my
All
answer.
right. And for our last question from Diane, what resources or courses would you recommend for us who are looking to improve our domain modeling skills?
Well, of course, I would promote ONB's own courses. Particularly, I have this course in Java. I'm hoping to eventually translate it to Python and C Sharp. Uh, um, that's in the plan. But I have a course called um, they we've tagged it Java 201 Professional Java, which I covered domain modeling, test-driven development, refactoring, and some best practices there. And then I have another one, Java 301, which takes it to enterprise. So, okay, so now the practicalities of dealing with the other layers of the application and integration testing and mock testing um, and what's this database migration, right? So of course, I would promote my own courses uh, as good places to start.
All right. Thank you so much, Sir Callen, for answering these questions. Now, in case you guys still have a questions, please feel free to chat with our speaker on Airmeet. And that's all the time we have for this session. If you enjoyed this session, please give your rating and share your feedback about our speaker. You'll find the link in the chat box. So again, let's thank Sir Callen by clicking on the heart or clapping emojis. Thank you, guys, and please exit this session and visit the expo hall to look at our exhibitors booth to connect with them. So, bye!